I am Cassandra Wilson, and at 28 years old, my life collapsed with 6 devastating words from my father. "We sold your silly patent for $10,000. Those words ripped away everything I had built, everything I had dreamed of. The algorithm I had nurtured through sleepless nights at MIT, the technology that could reshape renewable energy itself, was stolen in a single moment with a single signature. I never imagined that the betrayal would come not from rivals or strangers, but from the very people who should have protected me, my own parents. 3 years later, that same patent would be worth over $1 billion, and those who dismissed me now called daily begging for shares in my new company. Before I tell you how I rebuilt my world, I need to return to the beginning, to the place where I first understood that my family and I spoke a language that could never be the same. I grew up in a middle-class suburb outside Seattle, in a house where trophies mattered more than textbooks. My father, Richard Wilson, had once been a high school football player, whose glory days never really ended, and my mother, Karen, found purpose in organizing community events and supporting my older brother, Jason. Jason was everything they admired, athletic, charming, and the kind of son whose victories on the field filled them with pride. His trophies gleamed in a cabinet in our living room, polished regularly by my mother. My certificates, ribbons, and medals from science fairs and competitions were hidden in a drawer upstairs where no one would see them. At dinner, my mother often silenced me when I tried to share discoveries that excited me, steering the conversation instead toward Jason's next game. Even when I built a solar-powered water filtration system at 9 years old, my achievement was met with a half-hearted smile and a reminder that nobody wants to hear about differential equations at dinner. That indifference grew sharper as I did. At 14, my science teacher encouraged me to apply to summer programs designed for gifted students. I came home glowing, but my father cut me down with a single sentence: "That sounds expensive." My mother quickly reminded me that the family had already committed to Jason's football camp, which was their priority. That night, I cried quietly in my room, realizing that no matter what I achieved, I would always be second to a ball thrown through the air. The heartbreak deepened when I discovered that the college fund I thought was waiting for me had been drained to pay for Jason's elite training camp. My father dismissed my protests with the cruelest rationalization. "Jason has a real future in sports," he said. "You are smart enough to get scholarships." The $10,000 they had promised for my education had disappeared. I knew then I could rely only on myself. From that moment forward, I worked relentlessly. I took shifts at the local library and tutored classmates at night, saving every dollar in an account that only I controlled. Sleep became a luxury as I balanced part-time jobs with maintaining a perfect GPA. 2 years of sacrifice paid off when I was accepted to MIT, with a partial scholarship covering most of my tuition. My parents barely looked up from their routines when I told them the news. My mother suggested I attend a school closer to home, and my father muttered that he hoped I could afford it. I bit back the truth that I could have afforded it if they had not stolen my savings, and instead told them I had planned ahead. Arriving at MIT was like stepping into another world. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who spoke my language, who debated theories of quantum computing and algorithmic efficiency with the same excitement Jason once reserved for football scores. Here, I was not a misfit, but part of a community of minds pushing boundaries. It was during my sophomore year that I met Professor Alan Morgan, who became the mentor I had always longed for. One late night in the computer lab, he paused by my desk, glanced at my code, and suggested applying a neural network to optimize my parameters. That single observation opened doors to weekly conversations that sharpened my thinking and gave me confidence I had never received at home. With his encouragement, I began developing the idea that would define my future. The problem of renewable energy had never been generation, but distribution, how to store and transfer solar or wind energy efficiently across fluctuating demand. I dreamed of an adaptive system that could predict needs in real time and shift resources accordingly. Night after night, I filled notebooks with equations coding until dawn, while my roommate Lily Chang forced me to eat sandwiches to keep me alive. By spring, I had the first version of an algorithm that showed astonishing promise. Professor Morgan urged me to protect it legally, and with the help of MIT's student legal aid, I filed for a patent. That small step, though tedious, was the seed of everything that followed, both triumph and heartbreak. The years that followed at MIT became the most exhilarating and the most fragile of my life. Filing that first patent gave me a sense of security, but it also painted a target on my back. I learned this the hard way through someone I thought I could trust. Eric Donovan was a fellow computer science student, charming and brilliant, who seemed fascinated by my work. For a brief moment, I let myself believe I had found someone who understood me. But one evening, returning to the lab, unexpectedly, I caught him with a flash drive plugged into my laptop, my files open on his screen. He stammered excuses claiming curiosity, but the truth was plain: he was stealing my research. I ended it, instantly locking down my work on a secure server with Professor Morgan's help. The betrayal burned especially because it echoed the dismissive betrayal I had felt at home. That night, I realized that even among those who praised me, I would have to guard my work carefully. Still, my focus never wavered. With Lily by my side, I nurtured the algorithm into something real, something that could attract investors. Lily, studying business management, became my unofficial partner, grounding me when my theories spun too far into abstraction. Together, we shaped the beginnings of a company. We called it CleanSync Technologies, dedicated to harmonizing renewable energy distribution. We won university competitions and earned $10,000 in seed funding, enough to build a basic structure. At the MIT Innovation Showcase, I presented our work, trembling but determined. When venture capitalist Benjamin Rhodes approached me afterward, his words ignited hope. "This has billion-dollar potential," he said, looking straight into my eyes. For the first time, I felt that the world outside academia saw my worth. It was with that confidence that I dialed my parents' number, hoping against all evidence that they might share in my excitement. Instead, my mother spoke distractedly about Jason's upcoming wedding, her only question whether my computer thing might soon earn money to help cover costs. The sharp disappointment cut me, but I told myself that maybe if I showed them in person, they would finally understand. That Thanksgiving, I returned home with my pitch decks and optimism. The house looked the same, still covered in Jason's trophies, still empty of any sign that I had lived there. My mother barely hugged me before turning back to her magazines about weddings. My father was in his office, papers strewn across his desk. I caught sight of a letterhead I recognized: Tech Fusion Corporation, one of the largest energy firms in the nation. I froze. Why would he be dealing with them? Before I could look closer, he appeared, and I slipped away. At dinner that night, I tried to show them what I had built. I spoke of investor interest, of the potential to reshape clean energy systems, of a future brighter than any we had imagined. My father cleared his throat with the gravity of a man delivering judgment. "Actually, Cassandra, there's something we need to discuss regarding your patent." His words chilled me. My mother busied herself with food as though she could not hear. Then he spoke the sentence that shattered me. "We sold your silly patent for $10,000. For a moment, I could not breathe. Surely I had misheard. Surely it was some misunderstanding. But my father continued, calmly explaining that Tech Fusion had approached them and they had signed the papers. I shouted that it was mine, that I had filed it, that I had worked for years. Then my mother revealed the twisted detail during a medical emergency. Years earlier, I had signed a power of attorney so they could make decisions while I was in surgery, and they had never let it expire. They had used that authority to sell my future. And why? Because they needed money for Jason's wedding. It felt like the world was collapsing around me. All my sacrifices, my sleepless nights, my dreams, they had reduced it to computer doodling and exchanged it for a one-day party. I ran upstairs, hands shaking, and called Lily. Through tears, I explained what had happened. She gasped and urged me to see a lawyer immediately. The next morning, while my parents prepared for Thanksgiving dinner, as if nothing had happened, I met with an intellectual property attorney. He reviewed the documents grimly. The power of attorney, though originally meant for medical purposes, was worded broadly enough to authorize the sale. It was legal. Challenging tech fusion would cost years and millions with no guarantee of success. I left his office in a haze. Back at the house, I packed my suitcase. My father accused me of being dramatic. My mother insisted they knew what was best. I told them they had taken the one thing that was truly mine, then walked out. Lily was waiting at the curb with her car. She took me home with her and promised I would not face this alone. Yet in the weeks that followed, I felt as though I had lost everything. Tech Fusion announced the acquisition, proudly, my name nowhere in sight. The investors who had once praised me disappeared. Without my patent-clean sync technologies was nothing but an idea on a whiteboard. Those were the darkest months of my life. I sank into depression, barely able to get out of bed. To pay rent, I worked at a coffee shop, humiliated whenever I overheard customers discussing the groundbreaking energy optimization technology. Tech Fusion was unveiling my technology stripped of my name. My mother sent a text about Jason's wedding, mentioning that they might buy a vacation home with the money they saved. That was the night I blocked their numbers. I was done. But grief has a strange way of leading us to places we never expect. By the time July arrived, I had reached rock bottom. Lily came home one evening to find me surrounded by empty cartons and unopened mail, scrolling endlessly through Tech Fusion's press releases like a masochist. She snapped me out of it with a stern voice I had rarely heard from her. "This has to stop. You're coming with me tomorrow." I resisted, but her determination left no room for argument. The next evening, freshly showered and dressed in borrowed clothes, I found myself at a rooftop mixer in downtown Boston. I sipped a club soda, trying to look engaged, while conversations about marketing campaigns swirled around me. Then I heard it. A voice discussing neural networks for energy optimization, critiquing the flawed approaches others were taking. My ears pricked up. He argued that energy patterns were chaotic and required adaptive systems, not predictive curves. My heart pounded. I stepped into the circle and added my own assessment, pointing out the errors of linear regression in nonlinear phenomena. The man turned to me with sharp interest. He introduced himself as Darius Williams, founder of NextWave Technologies. When I gave my name, his eyes widened. Not the Cassandra Wilson who wrote that paper on adaptive algorithms for renewable energy. My heart raced. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again. Darius treated me not as a failed student with nothing left, but as a brilliant innovator whose insights were valuable beyond a single patent. He pressed his card into my hand and invited me to meet him formally. I admitted I no longer owned the rights to my algorithm. He dismissed that with a wave. Patents are details. It's your mind that matters. Those words echoed in my chest long after I left. I hardly slept that night, and by morning, I had dialed his number. NextWave's offices were a revelation compared to Tech Fusion's cold corporate aura. Sunlight streamed through green walls filled with plants, and teams collaborated in open spaces alive with creative energy. Darius showed me around, then spoke plainly. "I know about your situation with Tech Fusion. They bought your patent, but they didn't buy you. The brilliance is still yours." He offered me a position with freedom to pursue my own ideas. I hesitated, afraid to hope again, but he told me gently, "Don't let what happened define your future." Some of the greatest innovations come after the greatest setbacks. I joined NextWave, and slowly the fog of despair began to lift. At first, I worked on existing projects contributing to renewable energy forecasting models. But as I regained confidence, a new spark ignited. What if I could design something even better than the original Tech Fusion had acquired one implementation, but they hadn't bought the concept or the evolution of the idea? I began sketching diagrams at night, filling pages with possibilities. Gradually, I formed a new vision, a system that didn't just optimize distribution, but integrated production, storage, and consumption into one adaptive framework. It would learn, evolve, and respond dynamically. I called it Project Phoenix, a rebirth from ashes. At first, it was just me working after hours, but soon others grew curious. Darius gave his blessing, and I assembled a small team of engineers who believed in the vision. For months, we tested, coded, and refined, pushing boundaries late into the night. 6 months later, we had a prototype that outperformed my original algorithm by 300%. This time, I refused to repeat my mistakes. NextWave's legal team filed layers of patents covering not just the implementation, but the underlying architecture itself. For the first time since the betrayal, I felt secure. When we presented Phoenix to Darius, he was visibly moved. "This isn't just optimization," he said. "This is a new kind of infrastructure." His words filled me with hope. Yet his next suggestion floored me even more. He proposed spinning Phoenix out into its own company with me as founder and CEO, while NextWave would be both investor and first customer. At first, I thought I had misheard. "You'd help me start a company that could even compete with yours?" I asked. He smiled. "Not competition, partnership. The world needs this technology, and you deserve to lead it." That night, I called Lily, unable to contain my excitement. She screamed into the phone. "I knew it, Cass. This is your second chance." With her encouragement, I agreed. Energy Sphere Inc. was born in January, 18 months after my parents had stripped me of everything. Darius provided $2 million in seed funding for a minority stake. Lily left her marketing job to join as COO, and we set up shop in a converted warehouse in Somerville. The first day we set up our desks, Lily looked around and grinned. "From coffee shop to CEO in 6 months. Wait until the world hears this." The whirlwind began immediately. We hired 12 engineers, many leaving comfortable positions to gamble on our vision. Our first major test came when the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center agreed to pilot our system in a municipal grid. The results were astonishing: waste reduced by 28%, efficiency improved by 42%, overall costs down 17%. The Boston Globe covered the pilot, praising the system as a possible missing link in renewable infrastructure. Soon, industry chatter spread. Investors who had once ignored me now called nonstop. Grace Morgan, a powerful venture capitalist, insisted on leading our Series A round. With her backing, we raised $12 million, expanded our team, and moved into sleek Cambridge offices. For the first time, I dared to believe the nightmare of Tech Fusion was behind me. But success rarely comes without shadows. One afternoon, a thick envelope arrived from Tech Fusion's attorneys. In bold letters across the top, "Cease and desist." They claimed Energy Sphere infringed on their intellectual property, demanding we stop immediately or pay licensing fees. I read it twice, my hands trembling, fury rising in my chest. They had stolen from me once. I would not let them do it again. Our legal team gathered in a tense boardroom as I slid the letter across the table. Veronica Diaz, our lead counsel, adjusted her glasses and scanned it. "They're trying to scare you," she said finally. "Tech Fusion knows your technology is fundamentally different, but they're betting you won't risk a fight." The board debated heatedly. Some argued we should pay licensing fees and avoid years of courtroom battles. Others, including Darius, looked to me. It was my decision. I thought of the way my parents had dismissed my years of work as computer doodling, of the humiliation of serving lattes, while Tech Fusion executives bragged about my stolen algorithm. My voice came out steady, sharper than I felt inside. We fight. I will not pay for the right to use my own ideas. The legal battle stretched for nearly a year. Tech Fusion's lawyers dragged us through endless motions and depositions, insisting that EnergySphere was merely an iteration of the technology they had purchased for $10,000. Their strategy was clear: exhaust us financially until we caved. But we had truth and innovation on our side. I spent hours preparing testimony, drilling with Veronica on every possible question. When the hearing finally arrived, I faced their lawyers under oath. Their lead attorney tried to corner me, asking if my new algorithm had emerged directly after losing my first patent. I answered calmly, comparing it to losing a child's teddy bear and buying a different one. Related in circumstance, yes, but not the same. EnergySphere's system is fundamentally new, I explained. I created it only because the old one was taken from me. Sometimes limitations force breakthroughs. My words, to my surprise, made the judge lean forward in interest. For 5 days, they tried to discredit me, but each time I explained calmly and clearly how Phoenix, our system, went beyond anything Tech Fusion owned. 2 weeks later, the decision came down. The court ruled in our favor. EnergySphere's technology constitutes a novel and distinct innovation that does not infringe upon Tech Fusion's patent rights. Reading those words, I felt the weight of years lift from my chest. It wasn't just a victory, it was vindication. We had stared down a giant and proved that we could stand. Investors flooded in almost immediately. The cloud of uncertainty that had hung over us evaporated, and within weeks we secured a $50 million Series B round at a $300 million valuation. Utility companies lined up to test our systems. Austin, Texas became our first large-scale client, followed by Portland and Denver. Each implementation fed more data into our algorithms, making them smarter, more adaptive, more revolutionary. The press could not get enough. Fast Company named us one of the most innovative companies in clean energy. Forbes included me on its 30 Under 30 list, and Technology Review ran a cover story on the AI revolution in clean energy. For the first time in my life, my name was celebrated rather than hidden. Then came the opportunity every startup dreams of: an IPO. Investment banks competed fiercely for the lead, projecting valuations between $800 million and $1.2 billion. It felt surreal. 3 years earlier, I had been wiping counters at a coffee shop, drowning in despair. Now, I was standing in the New York Stock Exchange, surrounded by my team, as the opening bell rang. Our shares opened at $72, closing that first day at $89. By evening, EnergySphere was worth just over $1 billion. That night, in a private Manhattan restaurant filled with laughter and champagne, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number lit the screen. "Congratulations on your success, Cassandra. We always believed in you. Love, Mom and Dad." I stared at the words, anger and sorrow tangling inside me. They hadn't called during my darkest hours. They hadn't acknowledged their betrayal. But now, with my company worth more than $1 billion, suddenly they remembered me. Lily leaned across the table. "Everything okay?" I showed her the message. She scowled. "Block the number." I wanted to. But part of me ached for closure, for some final reckoning. 2 weeks later, the email arrived. "My father this time. We should talk. Your mother and I are so proud. Let's meet for lunch." No apology, no mention of selling my patent, just an invitation wrapped in entitlement. My therapist, Dr. Rivera, asked me what I hoped to gain from such a meeting. I wasn't sure. Maybe I wanted them to see what they had thrown away. Maybe I wanted, even now, a sliver of acknowledgement. Against Lily's warning, I agreed. We met in a sleek restaurant in Seattle, my parents already seated, smiles plastered on as if nothing had ever happened. My mother reached for a hug, which I declined with a handshake. They spoke of weather and restaurants until I finally cut through the charade. My father leaned forward, talking about family legacy, hinting at shares, even a board position for himself. My stomach twisted. You sold my patent without consent, I reminded them. My mother clutched at my hand, pleading that it had been a mistake. My father insisted they had made sacrifices and that I owed them. I set down my fork. I owe you nothing. I stood ready to leave when my mother blurted that they were thinking of suing Tech Fusion for undervaluing the patent. We could split the settlement, she suggested, as if it were a clever business deal. I walked out my hands, shaking. But leaving them at that table wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of their campaign to claw their way into my success. The weeks after that uneasy lunch became a storm I hadn't anticipated. My parents began calling my office daily, leaving messages with assistants who eventually stopped bothering to pass them along. They appeared at industry events where I was scheduled to speak, waiting in lobbies, and pretending they had simply come to congratulate me. They contacted journalists with fabricated stories about how they had nurtured my early talent and supported me from the beginning. Most disturbing of all, they reached out to board members and investors, claiming to be instrumental in the development of my technology and hinting that they deserved formal recognition and compensation. It was harassment dressed in the costume of family pride, and it threatened everything I had built. After consultations with our legal team, I agreed to one final meeting, this time not on neutral ground, but in their home, and not alone, but with my attorney, Marcus Llewellyn, by my side. The once immaculate house looked shabbier than I remembered, with peeling paint on the siding and weeds strangling the front yard. Inside, the air smelled stale, the furniture sagged, and stacks of unpaid bills lay openly on the counter. Financial desperation clung to every corner. My brother Jason was there too, sitting awkwardly in the living room, shoulders hunched like a boy caught in trouble. His presence surprised me, but I barely had time to process before my parents launched into their rehearsed performance. Marcus outlined our proposal calmly, a one-time payment of $100,000 in exchange for a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement and a permanent commitment to cease all contact with me, my company, and my investors. My father's face turned crimson. 100,000, he shouted. Your company is worth over $1 billion. We deserve at least 10 million plus ongoing royalties. I didn't flinch. You have no legal claim to anything I've created. This is not obligation, it's mercy. My mother began to cry, wailing about sacrifices and parental duty. For years I had swallowed such theatrics, but this time something in me broke free. What exactly did you sacrifice for me? I asked, my voice sharp with the weight of decades. You dismissed my achievements as meaningless. You drained my college fund for Jason's camp. You stole my patent and sold my future for a wedding. Tell me one thing you did for me that wasn't self-serving. The room fell into a stunned silence. My mother sniffled loudly, but her tears no longer moved me. To my surprise, Jason spoke up. His voice was low, almost hesitant, but it carried truth. She's right, he said, turning toward them. You did the same to me. You pushed me into sports when all I wanted was to study music. You pressured me into business deals I knew would fail because they matched your image of success. You've never supported either of us unless it benefited you. My father's face hardened, his denial rising like an old reflex, but Jason pressed on. I should have stood up for Cass years ago. Instead, I played the golden child while you used us both. I'm done pretending it was love when it was control. His words struck me like a revelation. For years I had seen him as my rival, the favored son, who always overshadowed me. Now, for the first time, I saw the truth. He too had been a victim of their manipulation. Marcus cleared his throat, cutting the silence. The offer stands for 24 hours. If it is not accepted, we will pursue restraining orders and consider litigation for harassment and defamation. He stood, signaling the meeting's end. I rose too, my mother clutching at my sleeve and begging me not to be so cold. I pulled away. What you call cold is simply clarity. Jason followed me outside. In the driveway, he turned to me, eyes heavy with regret. I really am sorry, Cass. For everything. I should have seen what they were doing. Maybe someday we can have coffee. As actual siblings. I nodded, my throat tight. I'd like that. For the first time in years, I felt a sliver of possibility between us. The next morning, my parents accepted the settlement. $100,000 in exchange for silence and separation. I never spoke to them again. For months afterward, they tried to twist the story, telling distant relatives and acquaintances that I had abandoned them out of greed. But I no longer cared. For the first time, I had severed the chains of their approval. I was free. With that chapter closing, I could finally pour my energy fully into Energy Sphere. The company grew faster than even I had dreamed. Within a year, our valuation had soared to $3 billion as we expanded into Europe and Asia. We opened offices in Boston, San Francisco, London, and Singapore. Our technology was credited with reducing carbon emissions in pilot regions by over 20% and increasing renewable utilization by more than 35%. Each success was another nail in the coffin of my parents' old dismissal, but more importantly, it was proof that I had created something that mattered. Yet financial triumph wasn't the only transformation. Something deeper shifted inside me. With the legal ties cut, I no longer felt like a child chasing crumbs of validation. I was a woman defining her worth on her own terms. The year after the settlement became a season of expansion, not just for Energy Sphere, but for my soul. Our company's market capitalization reached $3 billion as major utilities across North America, Europe, and Asia adopted our system. We grew from a small, scrappy startup to a global enterprise with more than 200 employees. For all the milestones, new offices in London, San Francisco, and Singapore, high-profile contracts, glowing press features, the most profound satisfaction came from seeing measurable change. Independent studies confirmed that in the regions where our system had been implemented, carbon emissions dropped by more than 20%, while renewable energy utilization increased by 35%. We weren't just making money. We were changing the world one grid at a time. But even amid the exhilaration, old wounds left shadows. I thought often of the girl I had been at 9 years old, showing her water filtration project, with no one there to cheer. I remembered nights of silence in my bedroom, trying not to cry while Jason's victories were celebrated downstairs. Those memories carried both pain and fuel. They reminded me that brilliance often blooms in lonely soil, and that I wanted better for others who might be where I once stood. On the anniversary of our IPO, I launched the Wilson Innovation Foundation, seeding it with $50 million from my own wealth. Its purpose was simple: to support young innovators from underprivileged or dismissive backgrounds, to provide the scholarships and mentorships I had once longed for. At the launch event, I spoke to a room filled with students, investors, and educators. I was lucky enough to find people who believed in me when I needed it most, I said. Not everyone gets that chance. This foundation will be a bridge between brilliant ideas and the resources to make them real. For the first time, my story of betrayal and resilience wasn't just mine. It became fuel for others. Mentoring these students became a new passion. I met them face to face, listened to their dreams, and offered guidance. One girl in particular stood out: 12-year-old Zoe Henderson, who had built an algorithm to optimize water use in urban farming. Her parents thought it was a hobby. Her classmates mocked her. But when she spoke to me at a scholarship event, her eyes lit with the same hunger I had once carried. People don't get it, she admitted quietly. They think it's weird. I knelt down, meeting her gaze. I understand exactly how that feels. Don't stop. The world needs your ideas. I placed her in a mentorship program and became her personal guide, speaking to her monthly as she refined her concept. Watching Zoe reminded me of the day Professor Morgan first paused at my desk, offering a small comment that changed my trajectory forever. Professor Morgan was still teaching at MIT, still inspiring new generations. One autumn morning, he visited our headquarters, walking slowly through the halls filled with bustling engineers. "I always knew you would do extraordinary things," he told me, but even I couldn't have predicted this. My eyes filled with tears as I replied, "I couldn't have done it without your belief in me." Later that week, I announced the Morgan Research Center at MIT, funded by a $20 million grant from Energy Sphere. Its mission would be to develop accessible renewable technologies for developing nations. It was my way of honoring the mentor who had seen me when no one else had. In the midst of all this growth, a different kind of relationship quietly bloomed. Marcus Llewellyn, who had once walked into my life as my lawyer during the settlement with my parents, became more than a professional ally. Over dinners and late-night strategy sessions, our conversations deepened beyond contracts and filings. He understood both my drive and my scars, the way ambition and pain intertwined inside me. "You don't have to choose between being understood and being brilliant," he said one evening as we walked along the Charles River. "The right person enhances both." For the first time in my life, I felt seen, not just for my intellect, but for my humanity. Through Marcus, I learned that vulnerability could be a strength. I could share fears without them being weaponized. I could speak doubts without being diminished. It was a revelation for someone who had spent a lifetime guarding her heart. The security I found in him translated into my leadership at Energy Sphere. I no longer led from fear of loss, but from confidence in possibility. As the company's influence spread, I realized that my identity was no longer tied to the betrayal of my past. That chapter was closed. What remained was the ability to transform pain into power, to take the very wounds that once defined me and use them as bridges to others still fighting unseen battles. One year after launching the Wilson Innovation Foundation, I stood on a stage in Chicago, looking out at hundreds of young faces. Some were scholarship recipients, some hopeful applicants, others simply there to hear the story of a woman who had once been written off by her own family. As I spoke, I thought about the strange journey that had brought me here. The girl whose science medals were stuffed in a drawer, the MIT student betrayed by her parents, the woman who had wept in a coffee shop bathroom after serving lattes to an executive bragging about her stolen work. That girl had not vanished. She lived inside me still, but she was no longer broken. She had become the foundation upon which something far stronger was built. The foundation itself flourished. Students from all over the world submitted their ideas, from algorithms to conserve water in drought-stricken regions to innovative recycling technologies. Many reminded me of myself, bursting with creativity but starved of validation. I mentored some, personally carving out time each month, no matter how busy I became. Watching them grow gave me a sense of purpose deeper than any balance sheet or stock valuation. Meanwhile, my relationship with Jason slowly thawed. We met for coffee, awkward at first, then more comfortably with each passing month. He had left behind the false promises of sports and failed business ventures to pursue his true passion, teaching music at a community arts center. He seemed lighter, more at peace. One evening, over dinner, he told me, "They still talk about you like you betrayed them, Cass. In their story, they're always the heroes." I nodded. Therapy had taught me the same truth. Some people cannot admit to their wrongdoing because it would shatter their self-image. My parents would likely go to their graves believing they were victims of an ungrateful daughter. But I had stopped waiting for an apology that would never come. I no longer needed it. That shift, letting go of the need for their recognition, was the real freedom. My success was no longer a rebellion against their dismissal. nor a desperate plea for them to finally see me. It was mine defined on my terms. I carried scars, yes, but they were not marks of weakness. They were proof of survival. Marcus stood beside me through all of it, a steady presence in a life that had often felt like a storm. He reminded me that I didn't have to carry the weight alone. With him, I discovered that true partnership wasn't about dependence, but about strength multiplied. For the first time, I knew love that did not diminish me, but made me more of who I was. On a crisp October morning, I walked Professor Morgan through the new Morgan Research Center at MIT. His eyes shone with quiet pride. "The world will remember you, Cassandra," he said softly. "Not for what you lost, but for what you created." His words settled deep within me. He was right. My story was not defined by a stolen patent or by parents who could not see my worth. It was defined by what I had built after the ashes, by the millions of lives touched by cleaner energy, by the young innovators given the support I once lacked, by the resilience that refused to let betrayal be the final chapter. As I reflect now, I see clearly that losing my original patent, though devastating, was paradoxically the best thing that ever happened to me. It forced me to innovate again, to build with greater intention, to protect myself more wisely, and to recognize my own value, independent of anyone else's approval. My parents once sold my life's work for $10,000 because they saw only doodles on a screen. Today, that same spirit of innovation has built a company worth billions and a foundation shaping the future. Their failure to see me did not define my worth. My response to their failure did. If there is one lesson I carry forward, it is this: our worth is never determined by those who underestimate us. Sometimes, the greatest betrayals push us toward our greatest breakthroughs. The people closest to you may dismiss your dreams, but that does not make those dreams any less real, any less powerful. Protect them, nurture them, and never stop believing in them, even when no one else does. Thank you for walking with me through this journey from betrayal to resilience, from loss to transformation. If my story resonated with you, I invite you to like, share, and subscribe for more stories of strength and triumph. And tell me in the comments, have you ever been underestimated or betrayed, and how did you rise above it? Your story matters, and it deserves to be heard.